Hi, everybody. This is Suburban Prepper going live. I had some technical difficulties yesterday during my live stream, which you couldn't hear anything. So I'm hoping everything's working out today. Hi, everybody going. And basically, I had my microphones all messed up and none of it worked. And I had a great rehearsal, let's say. I just couldn't even hear myself talk when I tried to replay it. So I'm redoing my broadcast today at 12:30. I've added X to my list of channels that you can listen to me on now. I'm on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and X, ladies and gentlemen. So, without further ado, it's been working out some bugs. I'm not just a prepper, a medical guy and a prepper. But I think I've got these bugs worked out and everything's ready to go. So we're going to get started. And hopefully everybody can everybody hear me loud and clear? And one thing I'm going to do this time that I didn't do last time is check my YouTube on my phone to make sure that I'm doing okay. And one thing I'm going to do this time that I didn't do last time is check my YouTube on my phone. And I got a good 10-4. I can hear myself think out loud. So, welcome everybody to the channel. We're going to get started here. First of all, as a prepper, I have my prepper garden. And I'm going to give an update today. And you do know that I do a lot of updates on videos of my prepper garden. And today's update is the tomato plants are like that big right now, starting to come in. The eggplants haven't popped up yet. I have some little carrots that are about that big starting to grow. The lima beans have not popped up yet. The zucchini, there's 2 flowers on the zucchini plants, and they're popping up. I have the potatoes, the red potato, or the purple colored potatoes, supposedly. Those have popped up and the plants are growing. And I know that my sweet potatoes take a long time to grow initially because they grow underground first and then the plant comes up. And then I'm thinking about one crop to do for my fall garden, which I want to prepare now because it's such a slow growing crop, would be broccoli. I'm going to grow some broccoli in my garage, and I have a heat lamp. Although it's going to get hot in the garage over the summer, so I don't know why I would need a heat lamp. Maybe I'll just put in a light lamp to give it the proper light. I'll put a light lamp. I have both of them, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the garden update. I've watered it. Really, the only watering I did initially was when I had all the little baby plant seeds to grow. I gave them a good watering, and Mother Nature and God took over. We've had plenty of rain here. The temperatures have not dipped below freezing, but it's still somewhat chilly, and the sun has come out. But, you know, this is Memorial Day weekend, and this is when I usually start planting everything, and the weather just starts warming up from now. So I'm pretty excited, ladies and gentlemen, if you know what I'm saying. So How's everybody like my new background? I've decided what color shirt I think I need to wear. You know, all the acoustometics. I'm thinking of getting a bright purple Barney colored shirt, which would contrast quite well. And this is my hand. This is my helper. Hi. And what I use my hand here for is when I do medical training, like a recent video I did on putting on tourniquets and Israeli dressings, ladies and gentlemen. And I was doing yesterday is trying to figure out which hat works best. And I was looking for I forgot that I had them all here in my fluster. I like my Indiana Jones hat the best. And I have most of my unit patches on here, except for 76 Infantry. I got to go to the PX and buy that. So I think I'm going to wear my Indiana Jones hat today, ladies and gentlemen, as such and so forth. So let's get started what we're going to talk about today. CB radios, ladies and gentlemen. I grew up with them in the 70s. I thought it was fascinating that you could go in your car and talk with other people, the truck drivers who were back then really cool about everything, going down the road. CB band emerged from the 1940s as a short distance means of public communication, ladies and gentlemen, for the public. And it became popular amongst businesses for logistics and operations. And it won over the hearts of the citizens, hence the word citizens band, CB radio, as a good way to communicate without the need for expensive licenses or complex equipment. Okay. And of course, the golden era of CB radios, and I remember this golden era because I was around, was in the 1970s. Okay. Due to the Smokey and the Bandit films and that trucker song called Convoy that came out, I think in 76. During this time, CB radios weren't functional, ladies and gentlemen. They were a cultural icon. They connected truckers, travelers on the road, and hobbyists, and a buzzing community of chatter. And I was a part of it back then. It was pretty cool. My dad would have his CB radio, and we had a blue station wagon. I'm talking the kind that looked like a tank. And he would put the antenna, it was a magnet antenna on top, and we'd go down the road, and he would do his communications. I didn't get to talk on it much. But a little bit about CBs. They operate on the 27th megahertz band. They're allocated by the FCC for public use on 40 channels, ladies and gentlemen. 40 channels, okay, that you don't have to pay for. These channels have specific purposes for different types of communications. Channel 9 is for emergency use only, for road conditions, travel tips, and general discussion among highways. Channel 19 is the truckers channel, ladies and gentlemen, widely used for road conditions, travel tips, and correction. Channel 9 is for emergencies. Channel 19 is for truckers. The range from CB radios is from 3 to 20 miles. It depends on the type of antenna that you have and some devices that you can buy that are amplifiers, which I don't know how legal they are. Why CB radios still matter? You know, we have smartphones. You saw me checking my own live stream to make sure I was alive. And we have satellite communication like Starlink, but they offer a unique benefit. It's a timeless tool, ladies and gentlemen, because it's reliable in remote areas, okay? You don't need a satellite. You don't need broadband to send your radio waves out. It's ideal for off-roaders, truckers, anyone that with a weak cell communication. As a preparedness prepper channel, it's always good to have multiple modes of communication. Of course, the four that to me are important, of course, cell phone, ham radios, GMRS, and I include the MERS and the family radio service under that, and then CB radios, ladies and gentlemen. So in emergency preparedness, you know, you want everything in the rule of threes at least. And I don't have a Skynet. I don't have a Starlink account. So it is what it is. And you want to make sure, you know, there's community and hobbyist appeal. Hobbyist appeal is only if you talk about it and do it. Talk to your friends about CB radios. And then, of course, it's not an expensive hobby. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a CB. I have a backup CB in my Gladiator, and I know my wife has a backup CB radio in her mode of transportation. And I've done a radio check once with her, but it's an alternate band of communication. What I want to present to you today, ladies and gentlemen, is one of my CB radios that I keep for emergency storage. Now, sadly, yesterday I already opened up the box because I thought I was doing a live stream and I was just talking to myself. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about the Uniden PC68 LTX. As you can see here, ladies and gentlemen, it's very beautiful. Okay, it's Uniden, and I like Uniden. You know, I have a Uniden police scanner, my SDS 100. This is not as technical babble as that piece of equipment is. This is more old school. Oops, there it is, if you know what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen. Now look at this, okay? And I can't help but remind me of the scanners. Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. That's nice color silver. It still has the wrapping paper on it. You don't have to take it off. And the channels flip like this, whatever you want to do. Play with what works good for you, ladies and gentlemen. And it's got the good clicking sounds. Can you hear that? Now that's, you know, good technology. I hear that clicking on and off. Of course, the talkie part of this is right here, ladies and gentlemen. I still have it wrapped up. Now, this is a backup. I already have a primary CB radio on each of our vehicles, but this is for a home-mounted system, and all I would need is a power device that I can plug into the wall, power the device, and it converts it to DC, because these radios run off of direct current. They do have them that run off of alternate current or 120, 110, but these were meant for trucks and whatnot, ladies and gentlemen. I keep the instructions even though I know how to use this thing already. We're going to put this back. So what I would envision is I would have a cabinet or full of different communication devices, you know, and they're all of them monitoring at the same time. Somebody's sitting down and with different antennas. Excuse me. Let me try to turn off my phone. Next item I want to talk about is the Hearing Protection Act. Excuse me. I want to lower my phone down here. And okay, it's lowered. So hear me with this one, ladies and gentlemen. In Europe, okay, the socialist republics of Europe, their citizens are encouraged to use suppressors, the few limited opportunities that they're awarded by the state to shoot. They have their firearms, which are usually bolt action guns. That's why the Europeans make such great bolt action guns. they can't have semi-automatic rifles in most of those nation states, unlike here in the free Republic of the United States. On the other hand, the oppressives in our country have made it where if you want to get a suppressor, you have to forego a police background check and pay the central government $200 called a tax stamp so you can own a suppressor. Each suppressor that you want to buy, you have to pay $200 to the feds to do that for basically a muffler. The Hearing Protection Act is a bill that's going to amend this Internal Revenue Code from 1986 to remove silencers from the definition of firearms, okay? Basically, it's like calling earplugs, because you use earplugs when you shoot a rifle, calling earplugs a weapon. It makes no sense, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not logical. And here's the part that I call it out like it is. This is something Reagan agreed to back in '86. We ignore that, okay? But this new bill is going to be called the Hearing Protection Act. And it wants equal treatment of silencers and firearms. And they want 90 days for this bill to come into effect for citizens. Currently, a person acquiring or possessing a firearm silencer in accordance with the law shall be treated as meeting any registration and licensing requirements of the National Firearms Act with respect to such silencer. And of course, the states can decide if having a silencer or a suppressor is even legal. Here in the free state of Indiana, free-ish state, I should say, you can have a suppressor. In the oppressive state of Illinois, though, ladies and gentlemen, the good citizens of Illinois are not allowed to own suppressors, and I don't believe they're allowed to own body armor either. Because when gangbangers go out to shoot, they wear body armor, right, ladies and gentlemen? But I digress. So, word for word, here's what they're trying to get it where you don't have to pay a tax stamp anymore. Wait 365 days for that stamp to get approved to your firearm dealer, and then you can take home your suppressor. Notice, ladies and gentlemen, I don't like to use the word silencer because I'm not from Hollywood, California. So what this legislation would require is for you to pass a background check just to wear, just to have something the equivalent of earplugs. I'm not opposed to this bill. It takes it off the stage of the National Tax Act, but still, it's just a muffler. Same thing, same muffler you have in your car. You don't have to pay a tax stamp for that, and yet people will take their cars. Basically, a car, ladies and gentlemen, is it's a explosive device to run. Okay, it runs on fuel. It burns that fuel, and it turns different keys to make your tires go around. Okay, and it has a muffle back in the back, so it's not so loud when you drive it. Makes no sense, does it, ladies and gentlemen? Makes no sense. So I started out as a paratrooper and flight medic in the Army, okay? And I enjoyed doing that, and I realized I'm good at saving lives, helping people. Then I went on to become a registered nurse. In that time, I've got multiple combat tours and peacetime operations. And when I came back from Afghanistan in 2005, I decided it was time to go to become a nurse practitioner. And I like to incorporate health discussions in my video feeds that I do here, ladies and gentlemen. And the disease process that I'm talking about today is autoimmune disorders, with some specific autoimmune disorders that I want to present to you today, ladies and gentlemen. And then we're going to talk about the medical treatment for that. And then after that, I want to talk about the integrative health treatment for it, because there's two different components to this: the allopathic and the alternative integrative naturopathic. The first condition that people deal with that I want to discuss today is called lupus. Lupus is an autoimmune disease in which the body mistakenly attacks its own tissues and organs. And of course, this causes pain, inflammation, and damage to the different parts of the body, including the skin, the kidneys, the heart, the lungs, and the brain. There are several types of lupus. Systemic lupus erythematosus is SLE. It affects multiple organs of the body. Cutaneous affects the skin, resulting in lesions, and rashes, ladies and gentlemen. And then there's drug-induced lupus, triggered by certain medications. And once you quit those medications, the autoimmune reaction stops. And then you have neonatal, a rare condition affecting newborns, little babies, from mothers that have lupus. And it's usually temporary with proper care. Now, you're going to hear this a lot: the causes and risk factors of these autoimmune disorders. You're going to hear me say genetically and environmental. Genetic meaning you're born with it from your ancestors, and environmental from living in the world, okay? So more people at risk are women that are of childbearing age are more likely to develop. There's higher prevalence in African Americans, Hispanic, Asian, and Native American. The family history, if there's a family history of lupus or other autoimmune disorders, it puts you at increased risk. The environmental triggers include sun exposure, okay, getting infections, stress, and certain medications. The symptoms can vary from person to person, which include fatigue, joint pain and swelling, butterfly-shaped rash on the face. I've seen this about 3 times in my career, the lupus butterfly rash. Sensitivity to sunlight, hair loss, ulcers on the mouth and the nose that don't go away, pleuritic chest pain. It hurts when you take a deep breath, and when someone's got a fever and you don't know why they have it. Of course, those symptoms are very broad and can go down different roads completely. It's and they mimic other conditions. So it's so important for medical people to get a good medical history of this. And there's lab tests that get involved. And the lab test that I like to order is called an anti-nuclear antibody, CT scans, and echocardiograms to check for damage to the organs, like the lungs or the heart. And if there's kidney involvement, kidney doctors will do a biopsy of the kidneys. Skin doctors will do biopsies of the skin to confirm. The sooner you can get diagnosed and treated, the better the outcome. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, there's no cure for lupus. The goal is to control symptoms. And treatment plans are tailored to everyone's individual needs. Mainstay of treatment include anti-inflammatories to help inflammation, hydroxychloroquine, which is a malaria drug, to manage joint symptoms, skin, and prevent flare-ups. Steroids for short-term use only, to help with inflammation. Immunosuppressants like azathioprine and methylphenolate to suppress the immune system. Of course, when you suppress the immune system, ladies and gentlemen, that puts you at risk for other infections. Other therapeutics include belimumab, and it targets specific immune pathways to help with inflammation. Natural thing you can do is have a good anti-inflammatory diet. We'll talk about that. Get exercise, protect from sunscreen, protect from the sun, okay? Use sunscreen. And I would recommend you using aloe vera as sunscreen, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll get into that more in a minute. Manage the stress levels, okay? Try to control your stress. Keep your routine follow-ups with your healthcare provider. Lupus requires a collaborative approach from the patient, your primary care, the specialty care, a social worker, family, friends, to make a significant difference. Thoughts, okay? Lupus is a complex and misunderstood disease from the medical provider, from the patient, and the consequences of it. Next disease process that I wanted to talk about is Sjogren's. That's spelled S-J-O-G-R-E-N, but it's pronounced Sjogren's. The J is unpronounced, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. Usually when I do my videos and I'm recording it and I have a cough, I just clip that part out and you don't hear it. But during a live stream, I can't. Sjogren's is a chronic autoimmune disorder, and it attacks the body's moisture-producing glands, okay? The immune system attacks such glands, such as the eyes, the mouth, and it has systemic complications. And it's associated with other autoimmune disorders like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And it, it impacts the quality of life. There's primary Sjogren's where it exists independently or as a secondary accompanied by other autoimmune disorders. It's most common in women over 40, but it can affect individuals of all genders and ages. The primary feature of Sjogren's is impact on the tears and the salivary glands, although it can affect the kidneys, the lungs, and the nerves. Symptoms can be mild, and the biggest symptom that you're going to see is dryness, dry eyes, a dry mouth. Obviously, you're going to have the fatigue, the joint swelling, dry skin. The salivary glands are going to be swollen. That's the glands under the jawline or in front of the ears. You can feel them with your tongue. You're going to have dental issues, okay? Recurrent oral thrush. A vaginal dryness in women, of course. And you want to monitor the kidneys and the lungs and the nerves for involvement. Of course, we don't know the exact cause of Sjogren's. Viral infections can be triggers that put predisposed people at risk for getting Sjogren's. And then, like all the other autoimmune disorders, this immune system mistakenly identifies moisture-producing glands and attacks them. Getting a good medical history is so important, okay? There's some lab tests you can order, although you as a prepper aren't going to order these lab tests, but I like to go over what they are so you're just familiar with them. It's the anti-SSS and the SSB lab tests. Anti-SSA, anti-SSB. Recommend look it up, ladies and gentlemen. You also want to check the inflammation markers of the body, which is the erythrocyte sedimentation rate or C-reactive protein levels. Although these two labs are specific for just inflammation, ladies and gentlemen, not complete disease process. Of course, you can have an eye doctor evaluate the mucus tear production and have someone do a salivary gland biopsy. And that would be under the realm of ear, nose, and throat. Imaging of the glands here, the salivary glands, and an ultrasound can help visualize disorders, and obviously a good eye exam to assess for eye dryness and to evaluate for any damage to the cornea of the eyes, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, if it's a disease where dryness occurs, you want to stay hydrated, sip water frequently during the day. You want to use sugar-free gum or lozenges to stimulate salivary gland production. Protect your eyes, okay? Use artificial tears or moisturizing gels. Wear glasses that wrap around to prevent exposure to wind and the sun. And make sure you brush your teeth to prevent cavities because of the decreased salivation. So right from there, you know, you're going to be seeing a dental, you're going to be seeing an ear, nose, and throat specialist and an eye doctor. And of course, your PCP's in the middle of it. Okay. Pilocarpine and cevimeline can increase the production of saliva and tears. Anti-inflammatory medications can help with joint pain. And then you have modulating treatments like hydroxychloroquine that can help with systemic symptoms and that fatigue. Steroids are not recommended for long-term use, but biologics such as rituximab can help prevent complications. So that's Sjögren's disease, ladies and gentlemen. The next autoimmune disorder that I want to talk about today is Hashimoto's thyroiditis, okay? Hashimoto's, it develops slowly over time. Obviously, you're dealing with disorders of the thyroid, so you're going to have tiredness. If your thyroid's not working right, you're going to have weight gain, more sensitivity to cold, hair thinning, or hair loss. You can have some dry skin, depression or mood changes, constipation, muscle weakness or joint pain, a puffy face, your heart rate's going to slow down. You have that brain fog, ladies and gentlemen. It can lead to goiter, which is an enlarged thyroid, and severe hypothyroidism, which can affect your overall health. So this is basically what happens when you have a slow-acting thyroid. All those symptoms occur. How do you diagnose Hashimoto's thyroiditis? Well, you check a TSH, a thyroid stimulating hormone. And this is the lab test the primary lab test you look at. And the higher the level, the less functioning your thyroid is. The lower the level, the more functioning it is. You check the T3 and the T4 levels, okay? You check for thyroid antibodies. Include the anti-thyroid peroxidase and thyroglobulin antibodies, ladies and gentlemen. Those are going to be up. Ultrasound, okay? So I just checked, I order an ultrasound, and if the endocrinologist chooses, they can order an ultrasound with a biopsy, but I'm not going to order that. I like to order just the ultrasound, ladies and gentlemen. Again, there's no cure for Hashimoto's thyroiditis, but there is a hormone replacement therapy, ladies and gentlemen. It involved taking synthetic thyroid hormone replacements like levothyroxine or levoexil. And I monitor my patients' thyroid levels about every 3 months. You don't want to be too aggressive with therapy because too much thyroxine can lead to atrial fib, ladies and gentlemen. Make your heart beat too much and you get a blood clot in your heart. You don't want that to happen. Dietary considerations for thyroiditis: gluten and processed foods can trigger an immune response, so cut those out. You want to include nutrient-rich foods, to include selenium, which you can find in Brazil nuts, and zinc from shellfish to seeds to support thyroid health. You want to incorporate an anti-inflammatory diet with fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, and healthy fats. Let me digress here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, animal fats are healthy fats. That's the bottom line. Fats from seed oils are not good for you, ladies and gentlemen. Much like drinking juice from fruit is not good for you, ladies and gentlemen. But animal fats are good for you. Okay? That's me talking. And of course, you want to manage your stress levels because stress can alter the body's immune system. Practice meditation, get good sleep. I've already mentioned selenium as a good vitamin supplement. It includes otherwise take vitamin D and take omega-3 fatty acids as supplements. You're going to need regular routine lab work. Living with Hashimoto's, okay? It's not a death sentence. Each treatment plan is tailored to the individual. And there we're at it. The next autoimmune disorder, and this is where I get somewhat controversial, ladies and gentlemen, is celiac disease. Okay? Celiac disease is, it involves the immune system, and the immune system attacks its own tissue. Why? Because when you eat something with gluten, okay, that's a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. Your body, instead of seeing gluten as a harmless substance, the immune system identifies it as a threat and launches an attack. And this results in the immune response that doesn't just target the gluten, it also attacks, damages the small intestine, particularly the villi, which are small finger-like structures that help nutrient absorption of the small intestine. These small intestine, the damage prevents your body from absorbing good nutrients, leading to symptoms and complications like fatigue, skin rash, anemias, and so on. You're not getting the nutrition that you need from gluten and your autoimmune response to it. So obviously a strict gluten-free diet, ladies and gentlemen, will help trigger the immune response. Cut and dry, ladies and gentlemen. The next disease process I want to review, and this is dear to me. I have several patients with this complex disease process, ladies and gentlemen. Multiple sclerosis. Okay? Multiple sclerosis. It's another chronic autoimmune disorder that affects the nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. And the body attacks the immune system. The immune system attacks the myelin, which is a protective layer against the for the nervous system. Myelin is crucial because it helps transmit electrical signals down the nerves. The damage itself is called demyelization. And over time, multiple sclerosis can permanently damage the nerves themselves. Again, possible triggers that can cause this include infections, smoking, ladies and gentlemen, low vitamin D, and unhealthy lifestyles. The symptoms can vary, okay? Difficulty walking or balancing. I knocked my phone. Numbness in the extremities. Foot drop, ladies and gentlemen. You can develop foot drop. Okay. Cognitive memory loss and difficulty focusing. Bowel and bladder dysfunction. And these symptoms can fluctuate over time. And it's a complex disease. Let that just sit in for a second, okay? So you develop incontinence of bowel and bladder. You can have blurred vision, muscle spasms, or stiffness. The immune system erroneously identifies myelin as a foreign substance and attacks it. This leads to inflammation and results in lesions in the brain and the spinal cord that are visible with MRI scans. So when patients have these such nonspecific symptoms, they go to their PCP, and you're thinking to yourself, what the hell am I going to do with this? And you got to just let your brain flow. Think for a minute. Okay, he's having these nonspecific symptoms. Take the patient at what they're saying, order that brain MRI and that spine MRI. And because this is a neuro issue, you're going to get neurology involved in it as one of the mainstays of treatment. You're going to get physical therapy involved in it, depending on what body organs affected. There's several types of multiple sclerosis, okay? Excuse me, I'm going to have a drink of my little drink here. There's relapsing, remitting multiple sclerosis with periods of symptom flare-ups, which are relapses, followed by partial or complete remission. There's secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. May develop after initial relapsing, remitting disease, with symptoms steadily worsening over time. And there's primary progressive, which features a gradual progression of symptoms from the onset without relapse or remissions. And there's a clinically isolated syndrome, which is the first episode of the neurological symptoms caused by inflammation and demyelization that may develop into multiple sclerosis. If you hadn't noticed, ladies and gentlemen, I don't like using the word MS because you never want to use an acronym with just two letters. It can mean too many things. Morphine sulfate, multiple sclerosis, mentioned soldier, so on and so forth. But I like to say multiple sclerosis. Management of multiple sclerosis includes disease-modifying therapies, DMARDs, like injections such as Rebif or Copaxone. These are interferon-like medications, okay? Oral medications like Giuliana, or Tecfidera. These are other DMARDs. There's infusions like Ocrevus and Lemtrada. I would never prescribe any of these myself, ladies and gentlemen. This would come from a neurologist. But it's important to know what these medicines are for. Of course, you're going to get physical therapy to involve mobility and strength, especially with foot drop. And there's medications that you want for like muscle spasms and bladder issues, antispasmodics to help with urinary issues, and fatigue management strategies. Emerging therapies for multiple sclerosis include stem cell, more advances in immunotherapy, and other neuroprotective agents. Having multiple sclerosis is overwhelming. I have patients that have it that still work. They lead productive lives. This is where you get a social worker involved, and there's a community of support available. So those are the disease processes that I like to discuss today with autoimmune disorders. Now, I don't like it when other medical providers cue the person like the diabetic. Okay, that's a person with diabetes, ladies and gentlemen. It's not the diabetic. Okay, so it's a person first. That's what's wrong with them after. So that's just me, okay? People first. I want to talk about the autoimmune disorders and the natural treatments, okay? And this is where my integrative fellowship comes in. I did a 2-year fellowship through George Washington University. And I call this integrative because you're still going to do the conventional medicine in addition to these naturopathic treatments, okay? Naturopathics focus on reducing inflammation, balancing the immune system, and addressing the root causes of autoimmune disorder. Again, it's not a cure, and these holistic approaches can alleviate symptoms and improve well-being. And of course, with naturopathics, there's less side effects. There's more holistic healing to include lifestyle factors. And you customize each disease process to the individual needs. I mentioned the anti-inflammatory diet. Now, I think I'm going to do a video on the anti-inflammatory diet by itself. But you need to eat foods that reduce inflammation, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Reduce foods that increase inflammation. Fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines. Leafy green vegetables, berries. Brightly colored vegetables, ladies and gentlemen, loaded with antioxidants. Carrots. Oh, yeah. I'm growing different colored carrots, ladies and gentlemen. They're so fun to grow. In addition to the regular orange carrots, and you cut them up and they have the color. Spices such as turmeric and ginger also have potent anti-inflammatory properties. Avoid trigger foods, ladies and gentlemen, and you're going to hear me say this and go on my spiel for 5 minutes. Sugars, processed foods, gluten, and dairy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the 4 foods that you should kick out of your diet, ladies and gentlemen. Trans fats and refined carbohydrates. Well, I agree with that, okay? Trans fats. And dairy, you know, there's some things that you got to have dairy with. I can't help it. But definitely sugar, processed foods, and gluten, which means no bread, no birthday cake. I would recommend, ladies and gentlemen, corn instead of wheat. There's something called the autoimmune protocol diet. that reintroduces inflammatory foods and introduces them systemically to identify what triggers your body. I'm not going to do that for you. That's something a functional provider could do. You want to reduce stress, ladies and gentlemen. Meditation and mindfulness. So I'm not a big yoga fan because it's going to sound crazy to you, but I'm going to say it. It's my opinion. I think those poses are worship of other false deities, and you're giving energy to those deities. I'm not a big fan of yoga. Tai Chi is okay. One good, yeah, I said it, ladies and gentlemen. I think that yoga is not good for the soul, for the Christian or the Jew or the Muslim. Don't do yoga, or do whatever you want. That's just my opinion, okay? And maybe I'm a little cray-cray. Deep breathing, where you take a nice deep breath past your lungs, okay, ladies and gentlemen, down to the diaphragm, and you blow it out, and you also force to blow out all that other extra air that is stuck in there, the residual capacity. Do 10 of those deep breaths, okay? You'll see me, I have this device here where it makes you, increases the breathing resistance in, and it helps build up the lungs, and it's great for stress. And you can breathe out as fast as you want. And that helps break up the mucus in your lungs too. And that helps with your stress response, ladies and gentlemen. Herbal supplements, okay? Of course, we talked about turmeric or curcumin. Now, these are adaptogens, okay? And I'm going to do a whole another video on adaptogens. Ashwagandha, it's an adaptogenic herb that helps the body react to stress, improving autoimmune symptoms. Of course, you heard me mention aloe vera at the beginning in the back earlier, and I bring it up again. Aloe vera is great for the skin, a small amount when ingested, especially, and it helps with inflammation. Really read up on about how to take in aloe vera. You need very small amount. It can mess up your electrolytes, ladies and gentlemen. And next is boswellia. It's great for inflammatory bowel disease like celiac or irritable bowel. Gut health optimization, okay? Now, this is the gut-brain axis. Okay. A healthy gut is a healthy body. Of course, we talk about probiotics. You can take probiotic supplements, yogurt, kimchi, and sauerkraut to help maintain normal gut flora. Out of all of those, I'll do kimchi and yogurt to a degree, but never sauerkraut, ladies and gentlemen. Prebiotics, okay? Asparagus, garlic, and bananas for healthy gut. Now, I'm not going to grow asparagus in my current prepper garden. And if I did grow it, I wouldn't grow it in the raised beds. I would grow it directly in the ground because asparagus comes back year after year. You let it grow for 2 years, and then the third year, you let it grow, you cut it, and then that part you can eat, and it'll grow back. And of course, I tried to grow garlic so many times, and I just can't get it to grow, ladies and gentlemen. Every time I'm doing something wrong. Look up something called leaky gut protocol, which can trigger autoimmune disorders. To help manage that, try L-glutamine, bone broth, and other probiotics. Of course, physical exercise, ladies and gentlemen. Not only walking, but working out, lifting weights, or doing workout bands. Walking, swimming, cycling, gardening, ladies and gentlemen, okay, is a physical activity. There's functional medicine. Check for nutritional deficiencies, magnesium, vitamin, and omega-3s. And some people talk about doing heavy metal detoxifications. I'm not going to go into that. Acupuncture can help out, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're afraid of the needle, they have non-needle acupuncture. And then there's auricular acupuncture points. And I have behind the camera here, and I'm not turning it around right now, I have a poster of auricular acupuncture points for different body parts, different systems. And what you can do to yourself is over the different ears, parts of the ear, you hold it for a minute on both sides, a couple days a week, and that'll help with that body part. It's time I do another video or a complete video on auricular therapy. Make sure you get plenty of good sleep, ladies and gentlemen. Don't have that phone with you at sleep. Don't sleep with the TV on, and don't sleep with a full stomach, and don't sleep with a lot of water in your tummy. Do the opposite of what don't do any of that. You want to take melatonin, which is the pineal gland supplement. There isn't a way to check your melatonin levels, okay? It helps regulate sleep. Make sure you stay hydrated and detoxify your body. Drink plenty of water. Now, I say that if you have heart failure, you can't drink a ton of water. You know what you got to do to maintain your body weight and make sure your heart doesn't have to pump so hard. But I digress. Herbal teas such as green tea and chamomile are great anti-inflammatories, and they have calming benefits. So that is my medical and integrative and holistic approach to autoimmune disorders, ladies and gentlemen. I want to incorporate a component to my live streams about some of the big things that I filled in. And what comes to mind was yesterday, I did the whole live stream. That's why I've been looking at my mic. And I had the receiver mic and the mic that you put on the body switched. So there was no sound in I did this whole video, an hour and a half long, and there was nothing heard. And it was, and I'm like, shit. So before I got started today, ladies and gentlemen, I was checking the stream on YouTube to make sure I could hear myself talk. And it's affirmative, 10-4, I can. But as a prepper, the biggest thing that I did that made absolutely no sense, completely illogical, and I did it, was I bid it on a government website. It's not a government website, but they have, you can bid for government items, and I bid it for a pallet, okay, a pallet, ladies and gentlemen, of MREs. Okay, and I just assumed, okay, because I'm an ass of you and me, that it was going to be the military type MREs. No, it was the humanitarian type MREs, okay? Because I was looking forward to having the little Tabasco bottles that are about that big, ladies and gentlemen. So I had a whole pallet of these humanitarian type MREs. And in retrospect, it would have been far cheaper had I just ordered all those same amount of MREs. I could have gotten the better military ones online than having to go through that bidding site because I had to pay for the shipping. And two, so what I did is I freeze dried a lot of those MREs. I keep them as a backup. I processed out the pieces that were not good, like the Pop-Tarts you can't save. I kept some of the bread. The bread will never go back. I actually freeze dried some. I kept some in their package. And the way I see it, ladies and gentlemen, I can use it as a bartering item as a prepper for when shit hits the fan, and as a backup for food. And there was about 5 or 6 different flavors of food. And one of them right away is the cheese tortellini. I just don't like cheese like that. And the others are, well, you know what they are. It's the modern MREs that the military have, although they're full of preservatives, but I think they taste delicious. Okay. I don't care what you think. If you don't, that's your opinion. I'm entitled to mine. I know some people think it's meals rejected by different ethnicities. I don't want to be rude. Back in the day, we said meals rejected by Ethiopians because of the starving in Ethiopia. Nah, meals rejected by everyone. I loved them. Okay, anytime we go on a field op, I'd be giddy about getting my 2 MREs a day, ladies and gentlemen, and it was a nice treat. And we would always have a bin where if you didn't want something, you would throw it in the bin. We never wasted anything, and a lot of people wouldn't eat the bread or whatever, or if you didn't drink coffee and they had a little coffee packet, you would put it in a bin and you'd go up and get whatever else you want, as your accessories. And it was cooperation at its best. So I digress, ladies and gentlemen. The next thing I want to talk about today is I'm doing a 300 Win Mag semi-automatic from Bear Creek Arms, and they're out of North Carolina. I got the upper, and I did an inspection on the rifle, and I need to talk to the company because I don't know if it's supposed to come with a firing pin, retaining pin. And my rifle comes with a side charging handle, but it's real easy to put in and take out, so I'm not really worried about that. It has a 1 in 10 twist. It feels really solid, though. I thought that it would fit any type of AR-15 lower, and I already have an AR-308, but it requires a specific lower. And of course, the lowers are considered the weapon part of an AR rifle. So I got 2 coming in, one for an AR-10 and one for the 300 Win Mag. And of course, I'm going to keep it because I do have another AR-308 barrel that I can just reattach to it. And you can't show live stream. You can't show firearms on live streams, ladies and gentlemen. So I digress. I'm not going to show you anything. I'm not going to even risk showing you the bolt carrier group. And it's a big one. It's not as big as my 50 cal, ladies and gentlemen. I think I should do a side-by-side comparison of the 300, my 50, and my 308, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to leave my 30-06 because that's just basically a 308 as far as similarity. And then 2, I did not know that I needed separate magazines. I didn't think about it. The 300 Win Mag is a lot longer than a 308. And I'm curious to see, once I get that lower, if my semi-automatic magazines will fit into the Bear Creek lower. But I did buy several different separate magazines for it. So that's what I did about it. I like making freeze-dried videos, ladies and gentlemen. If you hadn't noticed on my channel, if you subscribe, that'd be great. You can't freeze-dry fats. You can't freeze-dry sugar because technically sugar doesn't have any water in it, ladies and gentlemen. You can't freeze something that doesn't have water. And so I'm thinking about doing another video where I cook the bacon in my solar cooker outside. And I drip it off, get all the, much fat as I can, let it dry a little bit. Then I put it in my freeze dryer, ladies and gentlemen, and freeze dry the bacon. Get it nice and freeze dried freeze dry it, open it up in a month and see how it smells or tastes later, because there's still a component of fat in there. I did that with some beef jerky before, and it did freeze dried it completely. And it was actually very tasty because it's had such a crunch. It had such a unique flavor. So today, also, I want to talk about our U.S. Constitution, the various components of the Constitution, or that piece of paper over there that President Biden, I believe, referred to once upon a time. The Constitution is the foundation of our government and the people, laying out the framework of how it operates. You know, 3 different parts of it. And here's a simplified version of the Constitution. The preamble is the introduction to the Constitution, explains the purpose of the document and the goals of government. It's a single sentence that starts with the words, "we, the people," and establishes the intent to create a government that ensures justice, peace, liberty, and prosperity for all citizens. Key points with the preamble. It wants to highlight justice, defense, general welfare, and liberty. Then we go to Article 1, ladies and gentlemen, which is the legislative branch. That's our Congress, our elected officials, ladies and gentlemen. Congress makes laws. Congress is divided into 2 parts. The Senate, with 2 representatives from each state, regardless of the size of the state, and the House of Representatives. And that's based on the population of the state, ladies and gentlemen. That's why when they check the population every 10 years, they want to count as many people as they can. And the issue about counting illegal aliens is in the population is controversial. I'm not a lawyer. It describes the powers of Congress, creating laws, declaring war, and managing the federal budget. It outlines the limitations of Congress, such as taxation and individual rights, and it gives details on how members of the Senate and the House are elected and how they function. Then you have the executive branch, which is the president, the vice president, all the major agencies under the executive branch that enforce and administer laws, ladies and gentlemen. Article 2 defines the powers, including commanding the military, negotiating treaties, appointing officials, ensuring laws are executed. And this also explains the election process for the president and provisions for impeachment. Ever since Biden and Trump have been in office, both sides have been talking about impeachment, impeachment, and impeachment. And actually, it's very hard to do. Excuse me while I digress. Article 3, SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, sets up the Supreme Court and other federal courts which interpret the laws, ladies and gentlemen. Sotomayor wants me to comment about making law as a judge. Judges don't make law. The Congresses do. Judges in Supreme Courts and courts interpret the law. Okay, but if you're too far to the left, and I'm going to say it, ladies and gentlemen, as a far right-wing person myself, if you're too far to the right and you're in the court, sometimes you think that it's your obligation for the betterment of the people to make the laws through how you interpret them. I don't like it either way, ladies and gentlemen. So key points to Article 3 explains the role of the judiciary to resolve disputes about these laws, treaties, and the Constitution itself. I talked about the Hearing Protection Act being unconstitutional as I digressed. It defines judicial power and emphasizes protecting individual rights. So another issue we have today now are the illegal aliens that are here. Do they have the same rights as citizens? The answer being no, they don't. And I don't like a society where people don't have the same rights. But if you don't have a right to be in the country, you shouldn't be in here, ladies and gentlemen, if you're here illegally. When I'm in Europe, somewhere in Germany, I don't have the same rights as Germans do in Germany because I'm not a German citizen. But we have our judicial branch, our Congress, and our executive branch to deal with that. And I'm entitled to my opinion too. And the thing about judges is they serve for life under good behavior, ensuring judicial independence. And that's why I don't like when judges have a political affiliation, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I don't care if they're far left, far right, or center. I don't think judges should even run under a political party. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Article 4 deals with the states and their relationships with the states and each other states, ladies and gentlemen, and ensures that all states respect each other's laws and court decisions. Full faith and credit clause. Think about it. The governor of a state has more power over you than the president does. If you commit murder in that state, the governor and the governor's laws can punish you by taking away your right to live. Okay? That doesn't happen at the federal level. Article 4 also guarantees that each state will have a Republican form of government and protection from invasion. Article 5 explains how the process for changing or amending the Constitution and proposes to amend the Constitution can come from state or congressional legislators. And it needs broad approval, 2/3 of the Congress or three-quarters of the states to be added. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, there's 27 amendments to our Constitution. Article 6 goes over federal power. Supreme law of the land, as it were, meaning the federal law overrides state laws when there's a conflict. So the conflict I see, and I live in Indiana, but the conflict that I see is how the governor of Illinois has banned suppressors, banned body armor, banned AR-15 semi-automatic rifles, but at the federal level, these are okay. I think this is an Article 6 issue of the Constitution. Also, Article 6 says that no religious tests are required to hold public office. Understand that Maryland was set up as a Catholic colony and of the 13 original colonies. And when they became part of the Union, you didn't have to be Catholic to be in office anymore. The same could be said for other states like New York or whatever. Article 7 talks about ratification. It outlines the process for ratifying the Constitution. It required 9 of the 13 original colonies/states to agree to the Constitution to take effect. So the Constitution became a governing document 1788, ladies and gentlemen, when enough of the states approved it. Excuse me. Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, came in shortly after the Constitution was ratified. These 10 amendments are known as the Bill of Rights. They include freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, petition, right to bear arms, protection against quartering of soldiers in homes. In other words, you're not required to let soldiers sleep in your house. Protection from unreasonable search and seizures, right to due process, right against self-incrimination and double jeopardy. This is when a cop pulls you over and asks you, do you know how fast you were speeding, sir? So he's asking you to violate your constitutional rights, and you are not obligated to answer that question. You're also right to due process and protection against self-incrimination is the example. Don't answer the question. They can't ask you. They can ask you where you're coming from. You're not obligated to answer. you have a right to a speedy and public trial. Now, I don't understand, ladies and gentlemen, if it's a public trial, why can't cameras be in on every trial that happens, especially for these more famous trials, if it's a public trial? And of course, right to trial by jury in civil cases. And it's supposed to protect from excessive bail and cruel and unusual punishment. And that occurs when a police officer detains you and decides that they're going to take more aggressive forms to detain you, not pertinent to what they detained you for. Certain rights not listed are retained by the people. There are other amendments that have been made besides the Bill of Rights, such as the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, which granted equal protection under the law. As you know, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 15th prohibited voting discrimination based on race. The 19th granted women the right to vote. And the 26th lowered the voting age to 18. And I think that adulthood, this is just my opinion, based on human growth and development of the brain, I think adulthood should start at age 26, not 18. I don't know where the 18 came from, if it were up to me, but it's not. Yet we still have our young men and women who can join the military and die for us at age 18, even 17 in some cases. 16 with the Guard. You could join the 11th grade. So that is my spiel today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody heard this live stream and it didn't go into deaf ears like I did before. Anyway, thanks for watching. Every day I'm working on making this video better. Obviously, I can see what I needed to do. I got the hat going. I think this is a good hat. It's a learning process, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for watching. I am available on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and X. And all my videos will now be streamed to those 4 services. Everyone have a good Memorial Day. And remember, on Memorial Day, we don't honor the living veterans. We don't thank them for their cervix. We honor those who have died serving the nation on this Memorial Day, folks, which is tomorrow, Monday, the 26th. Okay? Now, you want to thank the living for their service on Memorial Day. And I think any reasonable person will say, you're welcome, and I appreciate it. But know that Memorial Day is to remembrance of the dead who have served. And a lot of us veterans on the different social platforms, we post about the people that we know in our organization or before or after us that have passed on. It's a day of remembrance. Yeah, I know that for some it's a mattress day sale. For some it's the unofficial start of summer. But for me, it's Memorial Day. It will always be the day of remembrance. How you celebrate it is up to you. I still plan on doing my live streams Saturdays, 7 p.m. I had to make up and do a live stream today because I had some technical difficulties, okay? I had to reboot the system because YouTube wouldn't pick up the streaming app that I use. I had to make sure that the microphone was working, and it is working, ladies and gentlemen. So, I digress.